I went through all 32 NFL teams to figure out exactly how each coach affects your fantasy football team. Today's episode, the Chicago Bears. So take a seat, class is in session. First, we need to see exactly how this team has changed from last season. From a coaching standpoint, it hasn't. They still have a 2-1 defensive approach, so we get to kind of see how this overall program develops a little bit further. You got Matt Eberflus specializing in linebackers, and you have Alan Williams specializing in safeties and defensive backs. We saw the Bears move a few of their defensive pieces in free agency, but we also saw them try to address those needs in free agency and via the draft. Now, since we're fantasy nerds, we're going to look at the offensive side thing, because let's be honest, that's all we really care about. Luke Getsy primarily specializes in wide receivers and quarterbacks. We can see this from his time with the Packers and now with the Bears. By free agency in the draft, it really looks like they're trying to step up their overall line, and they also added a dominant wide receiver one in that of DJ Moore, who is someone I'm very excited about, and you should be too. We've laid the foundation for exactly how the Bears attack this offseason. Now let's get into exactly how it impacts our fantasy football teams. But before we do that, we need to talk to the guys upstairs to see exactly the general direction in which the Bears are headed this season, so we can give our knowledge a little bit more structure. The Bears are currently projected to get between 7 and 8 wins, and honestly, I might even put them right on that 8-win count. This seems to be where consensus is also heading, so I'm not going to deviate too much from it. I initially was optimistic when looking at these overall rankings and thinking that, you know what, Bears could play second in this division. Hey, they may even surprise people and go first. But with all the defensive changes and the new offensive linemen, I do think this is going to take a little bit of time for them to develop as a cohesive program. So I'm not going to deviate from consensus too much here and put the Bears as third in their overall division. But I wouldn't be surprised if they surprise us all and somehow get second or first. I just really think this is the year where they start to piece some things together. Now that we've got a really strong understanding in which the general direction of the Chicago Bears is built this season, we can ultimately dive into how Luke Getsy affects our fantasy football teams. Starting off with the quarterback position, we have our boy Justin Fields. I've got 3 guys I really like to be dark horse runs for a fantasy QB1 this year, and Justin Fields is honestly at the bottom of that list, mainly because of how high he's already going in drafts. Justin Fields is currently going as the QB6 in most fantasy drafts, and honestly, that's pretty underpriced. For a guy that's really got about an average of a floor of 20 fantasy points under this coaching regime, and the newest addition of DJ Moore, I think we can really bump this up a little bit. If you want to be as optimistic as I am, I think we could honestly expect 23 fantasy points on average for someone like Justin Fields. You may want to try to argue with me about this overall really high projection that I have for him, but also consider, I have Lamar Jackson falling outside of the top 10 this year. Somebody's got to step up. And considering what we saw last year when Jalen Hurts got A.J. Brown, why can't DJ Moore do the same for Justin Fields? They're already building a rapport with one another, and Justin Fields' work rate is insane. With that being said, I think a realistic outcome for him is really sitting around that QB3 spot. Maybe even QB4. Moving over to the running back spot, I'm a little bit more pessimistic. I think a realistic expectation of 12 to 13 is more likely here, considering that we have a very rushing intensive quarterback, based on what they did in the draft on picking up Roschon Johnson and what they did in free agency by picking up D'Onta Foreman. Perhaps this is a move more to add depth than anything since losing David Montgomery, but it is definitely something to keep an eye on. Moving over to the RB2 spot, we definitely have a nice little uptrend here. Now we can debate whether this is going to be Roschon Johnson or D'Onta Foreman. I generally cannot tell you at this particular second in time. From what I've heard, Roschon Johnson basically would have been a starter at anywhere school besides Texas. But when you have someone like Bijan Robinson in that RB1 spot, I can see why he didn't get nearly as many reps. I mean, as we've stated previously, Bijan Robinson is the best running back prospect since Saquon Barkley. Considering that Khalil Herbert is going as the RB40 in most drafts, I actually see him as a bit of a buy this season, especially based off the production that he brought us last season. I'm also going to put Roschon Johnson and D'Onta Foreman both as buys here just because I think they're going to be strong handcuff options, but I do believe that upside is going to be a bit limited with the overall rushing upside that we see in Justin Fields. Although most will label Miles Sanders as a TD merchant more than anything from last season, we can see the overall upside. Now moving on to the wide receiver one and the guy that I'm trying to get in every single draft. And as you can see by my position here, I'm very bullish on him. I just need to upgrade to PS Black at this point in time because I need to max it out to 1,000. Like, yes, this is a downtrend, but with the addition of someone like DJ Moore, it makes me think that it's going to rebound, and we have a very high floor of that of being 17 to 18 fantasy points on average. That basically means that you're getting the wide receivers 5 to 7 at a wide receiver 26 price tag. I know the insight about Zay Flowers more than anything with Lamar Jackson has been speed, but I think another duo that we're kind of forgetting about here is DJ Moore and Justin Fields. And from everything that I've seen, it looks like Justin Fields is trying to make sure that DJ Moore and him have the best overall chemistry ahead of this season so he can make sure to get him that ball constantly. So I'm just going to reemphasize it to you one more time. Buy DJ Moore. Moving over to the wide receiver 2 and that of Darnell Mooney. Darnell Mooney is currently going off the board as the wide receiver 57. Based on what I'm thinking that DJ Moore is going to be able to do with Justin Fields in the offensive scheme of things, I think Darnell Mooney is going to be able to make so much more bigger plays on the other side of the ball. Am I optimistic about this downtrend hitting in a hyper influx and like going up to something like 12 to 13? No. I think a more realistic outcome is that 10 to 11 range, in which he is still being a bit underdrafted and undervalued as a whole. Now moving on to the wide receiver 3, and that of Chase Claypool. And from what I'm seeing from training camp, it's not a guy that you're really going to want to be targeting in really any of your drafts. It doesn't seem that they're the most happy about his overall progression as a player. And considering the downtrend that comes with Luke Getsy in the wide receiver 3 position here, and I think if you want to be optimistic here, you can guesstimate that Chase Claypool is going to have an average about 6 to 7 fantasy points on a per game basis. The tight end position is definitely a little bit more interesting for me here because I thought the signing of Robert Tonyan was quite intriguing. Does that mean we should count Cole Kmet out? No. But should we be expecting a massive increase of overall play? I don't think so either. I think fitting right on this kind of median line of about 7 fantasy points per game really makes a lot of sense and points towards Cole Kmet going about where he should go. If anything, he might be a little overvalued, but that's entirely up for you to decide. Make sure you drop down your fantasy football questions down below. I'm going to make sure to try to answer all of them as quickly as possible. If you find this series intriguing, insightful, or helpful in any sort of way, make sure you like and subscribe. We're dropping a video on the Cincinnati Bengals tomorrow. But in the meantime, peace.